of cohesion with each other, no matter if it was infighting. They still had their self-interest and the collective interest. So we didn't know who the enemy was back there. Today, after integration, we don't know who the enemy is anymore.
They've changed the history because we seem to be able to do things that other nationalities can't do, and we make it seem easy. We make it seem pretty, and we are arrogant about it, and we have fun with it, and it's just a great thing. And they don't want that. They want us to play the game the way that they have set it up to play.
It's necessary to destroy a man's mind in order to maintain control of him. If a man knows who he is and continues that into his legacies, to his children, then you have problems controlling that man.
Understanding history is one thing, but understanding why the colors were hidden, that's another thing. And the problem is, see, we can't exclude racism, white supremacy. That's the thing we can't escape. A lot of black folks try to avoid talking about it because it makes everybody uncomfortable, but it's a real thing and we have to acknowledge it. A lot of black folks don't really understand racism. And if you don't understand something, you're not going to be able to effectively deal with it and counter it.
Racism, as I understand it, is a global system for the genetic survival of the global white minority population. We usually don't think of whites as being a minority, but they're a tiny minority, fewer than 1/10 of the people on the planet, and they are genetic recessive, meaning that if a black person and a white person mix, the president, Barack Obama, you get a colored person. So if you want to maintain an oppressive process on a group of people, you certainly don't inform them of the depths and details of their history. Just like you don't give them adequate education, you don't maintain adequate housing, etc. Every morning that a black person turns on the television, they are getting their dose and indoctrination with white supremacy. You see, so if you turn on the TV or pick up a newspaper, look at a magazine, unless you understand the system, then you have a grid to put things in their proper perspective. But without that, you are constantly and continuously being indoctrinated by the system itself. You see, but the very fact that people who classify themselves as white would find themselves saying, something's wrong with your genetics, something's wrong with your genetics. In psychiatry, we call that projection. In other words, if I have to keep focusing on your genetics, I must have some doubt about my genetics, and we have the basis for that, meaning, the ability to produce melanin pigment or skin color is a genetically dominant trait.
The issue with black people is this: we hate who we are and love who we can be. We hate who we are, Africans, and love who we can be, Europeans. We do not want anybody to remind us of who we are, which is why we shun Africa. We are trying to get out of who we are. And we think that if we act white enough and marry white enough and dye our hair white enough, then maybe white folks will start treating us like white folks. You are an African. White people have never forgotten it, no matter how much you try to, and you will always be treated like an African. It doesn't matter how many doctors you got. It doesn't matter how light you are. It doesn't matter if your wife is white. You can ask Tiger Woods about that. You will still be treated like a black person.
And even today, if they don't sanction what you do and authenticate it, then it is considered non-valid. And that's unfortunate because that's not true, and we can't allow that to be true. And it was the same as with my work and a lot of other people out here. If you have not attended their school and learned their method, whatever they say it is, they have no respect for independent study when they used to be proud of in America, the self-made man, the self-made woman. That used to be it until it got out of hand and we started creating so many things,
William Shockley, who I debated about black genetic inferiority, he was a Nobel Prize laureate. He was one of the inventors of the transistors, a professor at Stanford University. Now, he could teach and talk about black genetic inferiority as long as he wanted. But a black person cannot talk about why racism exists and continue to teach at a university level. George Wallace found out. He said that's Governor George Wallace. Yes. He said when he first went into politics in the South in Alabama, he thought that poor whites, if they would join with blacks, they would have a great deal of political power. You see, and so that coming together of the poor whites and the poor blacks. And he said he soon realized that whites did not care if they didn't have roads, if they didn't have hospitals, if they didn't have schools. They just wanted to know that they were better than the blacks. Now, I say that reasoning comes because the deeper concern was genetic annihilation. You see, in other words,
these black men and black women, they were doing what they were supposed to have done for a long time, which was fight together against white supremacy, against racism. And they were doing this with the civil rights movement. So what happened, people had to come in and infiltrate and have a divide and conquer strategy between black men and black women. In 1964, government came in and they pulled black women to the side and they started to classify black women and women in general as minorities. In 1964, that's the first time they classified women as minorities. So they started to give them set-asides and benefits, and then they created the feminist movement, and a lot of sisters branched off into that, and that kind of created a rift because a lot of sisters stopped fighting for civil rights and they started to fight for women's rights, but women's rights weren't being jeopardized in the black community. Our first priority was racism, and we should have dealt with that first.
We wanted to be free. We didn't need any boundaries, need no man to tell us what to do. Well, we hadn't had no man to tell us what to do anyway. You couldn't tell us what to do in slavery, so we didn't really have no fight with you about that. That was the white woman's fight with her man, but we took it on. I want to be free. Ain't nobody gonna tell me what to do. And then women started having babies, what they call out of wedlock, and then that got to be okay too. Oh, it's all right. Once it got accepted by society, all of the rest of the people, then it was okay then to just have a baby. In fact, I don't even want him for nothing but to just have a baby. And then we started saying, I'm gonna be the mother and the father. All kind of nonsense. And so what happened was that movement, and there never was a sisterhood in the women's liberation movement between the black woman and the white woman.
Because you have to understand, in the tactic of the art of war, when you want to destroy a stronger enemy, you have to get rid of the cultural perspective of authority. So what do? You have to destroy the man in the society. And that's exactly what they did. I talk about this in my book. You have to destroy the masculine principle, which is the head of the family. That's part of it. The other part is to get rid of the environment and the ways and means rights or any kind of power. So when you have done that, you have now undermined the glue that keeps a family together. Men don't have to be men anymore. So what's the best thing to do? Since you're giving so many favors to women, I might as well be a woman, or at least act like one, and therefore I'm no longer, as Dr. Frances Cress said, I'm no longer a threat.
If whites are involved in their genetic survival and they are threatened by black male masculinity, then it will occur, I have to reduce his masculinity. Yeah, we just recently had the president at Morehouse have to say the male students cannot wear high heel shoes and dresses and carry purses. So something is happening, again, within the total context of a system of racism, white supremacy. Neely Fuller, who wrote the textbook for victims of racism a number of years ago, in the late mid-70s, he used to say in the system, because he was the first person to talk about racism as a system, and he said that as the system of racism and white supremacy moves on, the system is going to have black men wearing dresses. Now, to hear that in the 70s, people said, oh, this is way out. And here we are. You see, there's some black pediatricians who are saying we are developing epidemic levels of the effeminization of young black males. Well, I say the pants sagging down is just a subconscious invitation for homosexuality. You see, it's revealing the buttocks. See, so the pants are getting lower and lower and lower. The next step is to step out of the pants altogether. And so you step out of the pants, you're going to put on a dress. The effeminization is an essential ingredient of white genetic survival. And the only thing that can prevent it is black people becoming conscious or becoming determined that this is not going to happen to them, because if the black men are destroyed, then the black people are gone, and we have a state of genocide.
They always have in the media that black children inherently have lower IQs. They always show these studies of black children's IQs being lower, but what they leave out is that African immigrants, they come over to America and they outperform everybody else academically, including Asians and including whites.
Because first of all, IQ is so culture-based. I mean, IQ doesn't exist. And the evidence of that is just look around you. Because if that's the case, Europeans ain't doing that great either. Because compared to the world, out of 166 countries that was tested, the United States of America, European American students, there was only 12 countries did worse than the United States of America. So IQ, it has nothing to do with, that's a lot of game.
First, the concept of IQ, the intelligence quotient, comes out of Germany during the rise of Hitler. It was a German white man by the name of Wilhelm Stern who created the intelligence quotient for population extermination reasons. He was later rejected and put out of Hitler's camp, but the IQ is an invention of Nazi Germany. Now, the first IQ test ever used in the world comes out of France. A European named Alfred Binet, at the request of the French government, was asked to design a test whereby the French government could group or track the students based on how bright they were and identify those who they felt would not be successful in school at all. A white man from New Jersey, Henry H. Goddard, who was a member of the American Eugenics Society, went to France, got a copy of the Binet scales, first white IQ test, brought the Binet scales back to America, made copies of it, and distributed it across the country to white folks everywhere. And Henry H. Goddard himself said that with this tool, we will be able to accomplish our eugenicidal ends. So from the beginning, the IQ test was never meant as an objective standard to see how smart black kids was. It was used to justify access to opportunity and extermination and racial control.
And they're not being taught. I have a boy, Hassan, he's 10, and I took him to school, and he was at the genius level because I had taught him at home. You know, he was like 7 years old. He had an IQ of 153. Well, they made sure they dumbed him down, and 2 years later, he was barely passing. I had to take him, I said, and I fought with him every day.
They snatched it. It's like when our children in school are saying that, you know, when somebody's real smart, they say, oh, you acting white. They don't understand that people that look like them invented thinking. In fact, we were thinking before Europeans were even on the planet. Yet we don't know this about ourselves. And because our children are not familiar with this history of themselves, they can't see themselves because they're taught that slaves came from Africa. And so therefore, I'm going to act like a slave because that's who I am. But they don't see themselves as Imhotep, or they don't see themselves as Queen Nzinga, or Preshet, a second dynasty female doctor, or they don't see themselves as Hypatia, a great mathematician and medical doctor that was skinned alive by the Romans because they did not want to show an African woman being so intelligent, and dragged her through the community to show people what they were going to do to this African woman.
The African man and the African woman's mind does not operate along European paradigm of structure. So if you're teaching him one way, he's going to automatically fail. If the system is structured for him to fail, Of course he's going to fail. He's going to say, see, I told you. That's ridiculous. We know that genius